The video begins with the text PR Plus presents in pink on a yellow background. In this video, Anahita, a queer disabled feminist, performing artist, and educator, speaks to us about the negotiations within relationships, boundaries, self identity, and creating a space of comfort for ourselves.
I think when we're talking about desire and intimacy and pleasure, we have to remember that it's really important for us to first take conscious time and space out to really figure out what we like, um, what feels good, what doesn't feel good, what parts of the body of mine feel a certain way when I touch them a certain way. I think the more we know about ourselves and take time out to really feel pleasure also on our own, the better we are equipped at really understanding how intimacy works with other people as well, and also receiving pleasure from other people, right? This is especially, of course, hard in a country but also a world that teaches us often that our desires are dirty, or especially that you know any kind of self pleasuring is kind of seen looked down upon. I think in India this is very common, especially for those who don't identify as men. But I think it's a very, very important thing for us to take the time out to do. Also, because it can bring us great joy, and we already know we're kind of constantly negotiating with our bodies because of our disabilities. And I think it's only right that we also take the time out to feel the joy of all the things that are possible. I think this is also equally important to understand physically what's going on with you. And what I mean by this is, for example, I remember, I think it was in the first couple of years after my pain really began and kind of became a huge part of my life, that I realized that I was craving touch that wasn't related to being poked and prodded by doctors, not being at a physiotherapy clinic where they are trying to fix you or they are trying to heal you. And I just wanted someone to touch my back in a way that was personal and intimate. And I was craving it, and I hadn't realized it until a close friend kind of did. And I think it really shifted something in me, and it really helped me learn the different kinds of touch that I also needed to be giving my body in order to feel sane, and to feel pleasure. And pleasure, I don't just mean sexually, I just mean pleasure as in how human beings need touch. And I think this, for many of us, is something that we don't really give ourselves the time to figure out. And I think for me, it's been very, very helpful to know the difference between those two things, especially because we are constantly in contact with people who are touching us, caregivers, doctors, etc. And that's not the same as other kinds of touch. Just like that, I think one of the things we take in after we've had this conversation with ourselves to figure out what we like, what we don't like, what feels good, etc., we have to take that conversation into our intimate spaces with other partners. The more we know ourselves, I think the easier it becomes to have these conversations with other people. And I think it's really lovely that I often, if one party is willing to open a channel of conversation where they're really clear and honest about what they want, then it also invites the other party to do the same. And having that kind of healthy dialogue between two or more partners can play out very kind of in very positive ways throughout relationships, short or long. Be open about where we're at. It's totally okay to not be in the same place as someone else, for expectations to be different. But when you're communicating what your expectations are, then it automatically, I think, takes away a lot of the burden of, oh, I have to fulfill something for somebody else, even if I don't want to do it, even if I'm uncomfortable, etc. So that kind of honest conversation, one, can only come if you know yourself, and two, if both of you are able, or multiple people are able, to really speak to each other without feeling guilty, especially, or feeling uncomfortable. Of course, every relationship, doesn't matter basically, as long as it involves two living beings, has power dynamics. And I think the queer relationships and relationships where one party or multiple parties are disabled, of course, the power dynamics shift even more, they become even more complex. And so we really do need to look out for moments where we are feeling comfortable or uncomfortable, and things that are often played out on ourselves and on our bodies by other partners. There's a lot of talk about what are red flags, and perhaps some of the things that one can be thinking about that are very common and that I personally have also kind of dealt with are things like being made to feel guilty for not wanting to do certain things or not feeling able to do certain things. Of course, there's the classic of being called lazy or being told that everything only happens on your terms, nothing happens when I want it, or what I want is not happening, and not really trying to understand the what's happening behind that or why somebody may not want something. Of course, there's situations where we feel pushed into or forced, and not physically, any kind of forced into doing things that we aren't ready for, aren't feeling good about, don't want to do right now, have done in the past but don't want to do right now. All of these are perfectly acceptable things. But if we're being pushed into it, I think we carry so much guilt about not being able to fulfill the other person's desire or give them what they want. And I think that's something really for us to think about. And I think one thing that really helps me is, especially I think in the last decade or so, we spend so much time negotiating with our bodies and understanding them and really figuring out, how to live our lives in a way that is restful to us and is positive and works for us in a system and a world that doesn't really allow for that. If we can start really paying attention to what our bodies and minds are telling us, the signals they are giving us when something feels off or uncomfortable, then I think we can tap into the knowledge that we already have. And those will tell us what are red flags or not, because those are also things that change constantly. Red flags change constantly, consent changes constantly. We already know this, but how do we put it into practice and remember it? And I think our bodies and minds, each of us individually, are such a huge tool and have so much wisdom and knowledge in them already that we really just need to tap into them in order to kind of come out in a space where we are in charge of how we feel and what we do, and can be accepted as such.
This video ends with two logos on a yellow background. The first one is a pink heart and a plus sign and has PR plus written underneath. And the second one is a green and black eye and has point of view written next to it.